Good afternoon. Please continue to eat, but we're going to start our panel right on time at 12 noon. I want to thank everyone for coming today. I'm extremely excited about the subject matter that we're going to talk about. I can't imagine a more exciting time for this industry from a natural gas LNG perspective, and so I'm really looking forward to the comments of the gentleman on my right and my left, and certainly the participation from the audience. My name is Chris John. I am president of Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association, which is the association that represents the major oil and gas companies, pipelines, upstream, downstream, and midstream. I've been there for almost 10 years now, and it's been an incredible 10 years riding through the ups and downs of the industry. And I'm happy to be here. I'm also a member of LEA, the Louisiana Energy Export Association, which is a brand new association started back in April of this year. And it is the association that was born out of all of the liquefied natural gas projects that are happening. Their goals are to promote all of the LNG and the components that go along with it. So I'm proud to be a part of that association as well. In recent months, in response to very tight supplies, prices of natural gas have increased sharply. Working gas in storage is currently at very low levels. In the United States, rising demand for natural gas, especially for clean burning sources for electric power, is pressing against a supply, essentially restricting North American production. Today's tight natural gas markets have been a long time in coming, and future prices suggest that we are not apt to return to early periods of relative abundance of low prices anytime. And high gas prices projected in America's distant futures markets have made us a potential very large importer of natural gas. Importer. Access to world natural gas supplies will require major expansion of LNG import terminals. As the technology of LNG liquefaction and shipping has improved and the safety considerations have lessened, a major expansion of U.S. import capabilities appear to be underway. June 2004, Alan Greenspan, who is the chairman of the Federal Reserve, spoke to the Energy and Commerce Committee in Congress. At that time, I was a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, sitting from here to the table in front of him, listening to those remarks and those excerpts of those remarks. And obviously, to summarize them, he was urging the more LNG dollars in investment to LNG imports because natural gas was the fuel of choice. It was very clean burning. It was very good for electric power generation, and we need to make sure and build more LNG import facilities. 2003. Boy, have we come a long way. Funny, have we come a long way? I was sitting here reading this, and Greg kind of hit me and said, export, export. I'm like, no, it's import. He thought I was going down a path that wasn't. But it's truly amazing where this industry has gone. And it's exciting for me to be here today with two gentlemen who are major players in the LNG investment in the state of Louisiana. I'm going to give them a chance to talk a little bit about their projects, their companies, and give their view. But I really wanted to read that just to give everybody a framework of how far we've come in 14 years. And frankly, it has been two things that have been game changers that put us in this room today that has changed the game of natural gas and oil and natural gas in this country. One is hydraulic fracturing. No, let me repeat that. It's actually not hydraulic fracturing. It is directional drilling. Directional drilling is what has happened and enabled us to hydraulically fracture these shale plays around the country. It cannot be overstated how much that has changed America as being an energy superpower in this country. It has brought us to now, as America being the #1 producer of oil in the whole world. Just a few months ago now, in this downturn, we may have fallen a spot, but we are now at a place where we have never been. When I was in Congress, I remember we talked about how we needed to become more independent. We had to import more oil to get off of this foreign oil imports. And what can we do? And the whole conversation for the last 40 years is about how does America become energy independent? Well, we've achieved that and more. And it's been through two game changers: directional drilling, hydraulic fracturing in the shale plays across the country, and the Congress's decision just recently to allow the export of oil. Those two things, I believe, are really a big reason for why we are here today in the situation we have. Has it been very difficult? Yes. I was meeting with the young professionals right beforehand, and we talked a little bit about the oil and gas industry and how intriguing it is. And it is just amazing the geopolitical changes that have happened to our industry in really a short period of time. As it relates to the oil market, which is globally, I mean, back in November of 2015, if you all remember, Saudi Arabia declared economic war on our hydraulic fracturing onshore production. They started to turn up the throttle in all of the production, hoping to drop the price of oil and decimate our production, our newfound technology, because it was a threat to them globally. And it hurt. It did hurt, but it never had and never will have the effect, the catastrophic effect that they wanted it. So we are now turned the corner. In fact, Saudi Arabia and OPEC are now in negotiations every day about cutting production to kind of keep the price of oil where it is. So that doesn't just happen overnight, and that doesn't just happen. I think it's been the technological advances that this industry has done and has put us in the forefront to actually be at the head of the table in world energy discussions. So that's an exciting time for us. And I get real excited talking about it because it is, I could not have given this speech like a year ago because, it was tough. It was tough. And I see Keith Sayon over there shaking his head. He's been through some tough times. But we are not here today also without the story of natural gas. The story I started off with my comments is just amazing. I tell it all the time because we've come just a full circle. And now we are the world's largest natural gas country in the world. And it doesn't seem to stop. We've, talk about the Eagle Ford or the Marcellus or the Haynesville, or you go on and on and on, and there's another one around the corner. And I think you're going to continue to see that. So I think the supply that we have in this country is extremely important to these projects that we're going to talk about here. Because frankly, without as I like to say, the investments to Cameron and Calcasieu and New Orleans and Port Fourchon and all these billions of dollars that you read about, they're not coming here for the low humidity and the mosquitoes, folks. They're really not. They're coming here for several reasons. First of all, the availability of natural gas. And second of all, the infrastructure. We have hundreds of thousands of miles of pipelines and infrastructure in this state because it all funnels kind of right down the Mississippi River for the most part. And those are the things that have to happen to be able to enjoy the kinds of investments that you're going to hear about here shortly. So with that, I'd like to introduce our two panelists today. I'm sorry I kind of got on my soapbox a little bit. I was supposed to be a moderator. I know, Don. Sorry. You give a politician a microphone, it's hard. But I want to introduce to you today a couple of gentlemen who are on the front lines of all of the investment that's happened to talk a little bit about their project and also give us a reason, why they're here and what they see globally. And the first one we have is Greg Vesey. Greg is the Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer of Magnolia LNG facility. Greg is kind of a native of Louisiana. He was a graduate of Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, Louisiana. I love that. Actually played golf up there, I understand. And he has been in the LNG natural gas world for a very, very long time. He's a 35-year employee of Chevron and has held multiple positions in Chevron, everything from marketing of natural gas to LNG facilities all over the world. So, Greg, why don't you come on up and tell us a little bit about your facility, or just stay right there. Give us a little bit about your facility, and we're happy to have you, and thank you for coming.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Can you hear me okay? Well, first of all, thanks to LAGCOE. It's a pleasure to be here, and any chance I get to talk about Magnolia, obviously I like to do that. A little bit about LNG Limited. We're an Australian company. We actually started trying in Eastern Australia to turn coal seam gas into LNG. And that's really how we got our start. But all of our activity now is in North America. We have a project in Canada called Bearhead, and our most immediate project here in Lake Charles area in Calcasieu called Magnolia. Magnolia is an 8 million ton facility. So for those of you in the gas business, that takes about a 1.4 BCF a day of feed to keep that facility running. So a meaningful facility. It's going to cost about $4.5 billion to build this facility. We've got a lump sum turnkey agreement in place with a joint venture of KBR and the South Korean firm SKE&S. They have a joint venture, and we've got a lump sum turnkey agreement on that. The actual number there is $4.35 billion. And so that's in place till the end of this year, and we've typically renewed that on 6-month intervals with a little bit of updating. In terms of Magnolia's position on the FERC process, we're done with everything. We have got our notice to proceed, our final order. We've got our clearance from the DOE to go to non-FTA countries. We have that all in place. And on the financial side, we received a $1.5 billion equity commitment from a firm called Stone Peak Infrastructure Partners, which will help us finance the facility. So as Chris kind of touched on, what's left for us is signing contracts. This is a project financed activity. They want to see the full equation. So what the banks want to see now is these 20-year contracts at a price that will give us a revenue stream to meet our debt requirements. And that's really where we are right now. That has been very frustrating because it's been a very soft LNG market for a couple of years now. There's not been a lot of customers wanting to sign agreements. What agreements they are signing is spot to 1 year or 3 to 5 year type agreements. You're not seeing the long-term agreements that we need to finance these facilities. I do feel we're on the cusp of a change there. There seems to be a lot of interest in signing those contracts now and talking about that. And what's driving that is really some simple calendar math. Most of the pundits in the industry, Shell, BP, Woodmac, a lot of firms, they're all saying in the 2022 timeframe, you're going to see demand start to exceed supply again and put some tightness in the market. And LNG customers rely on this. So this is Asian customers. This is their only source of natural gas. They don't want to be exposed to shortfalls. So they're looking at that very hard and saying, okay, if I need LNG at that point in time, we really need to get things started now so the construction can take place and the facilities will be ready for us in that point in time. I guess the other thing I would add is the world views U.S. gas, to Chris's point, as a great place to buy natural gas. They've become very comfortable with the resource. You know, we had to go through that stage of proving to them that shale gas was real, and we've done that. It's now a very stable price environment. Whoever thought we would say that about the Henry Hub? But it's a very stable price environment. But if you look out now, there is not a lot of volatility in that. That's very comforting to them. And obviously, the U.S. is a great place to do business with. They like the political environment here. In fact, this administration is actually great for the energy industry. They're out there beating the path for LNG as a fuel around the world, and that's important for us. One of the reasons why, and I think this is important for all of us to remember, is one of the focuses of this administration is trade deficit. And LNG exports is a natural market reaction that will fix trade deficits. Magnolia alone itself, when it's up and running, will improve the trade deficit by $2.5 billion a year. That's very important to this administration. All of our facilities that are planned in this, that come on board, will have some similar type of number to improve that. Again, very important to the administration, and that's why you're seeing him embrace South Korea, embrace China, embrace Japan. That's very important. I think the other thing for the region is, while we're competitors, we'd love it if we all succeed. And that's why we're all participating in LEA as part of this. Be great for the region, be great for all of us to have a really nice, big, robust industry headquartered here in South Louisiana. Wouldn't that be awesome? Doesn't that deserve some applause? I mean, come on. But that's really the point. While we are competitors, we work together very well, and we'd really be happy if everyone succeeded at the same time. So I really appreciate being here, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Our next panelist is really no stranger to Louisiana, somewhat. Tommy Hudson. Mr. Tommy Hudson currently serves as president of G2 LNG. He's an attorney in Baton Rouge that has been focused on energy issues and represented clients, both independents and majors, for many, many, many years. Mr. Hudson also served as chief of staff for U.S. Senator John Breaux. He also served as administrative assistant to U.S. Senator Bennett Johnson. He was also a state senator at some point a long time ago, right, Tom?
I don't remember.
And he is, again, the president of G2 LNG, which is another major facility in the same area down in Cameron-Calcasieu region. So, Tommy, with that, tell us a little bit about G2 and your vision.
Chris, thank you very much. First, Greg Vesey is an acknowledged leader in the LNG industry. They have a project that is in an enviable position, as he outlined, and I hope in 1 year to be able to make the same announcement that Greg made just a minute ago. Hopefully we can go to school on Magnolia. They've done a magnificent job and are going to bring jobs and a great economic impact to Louisiana. Chris, thank you for the introduction. Probably there are very few individuals who have done more for this industry than Chris John. While in the legislature of Louisiana, in the Congress in Washington, and the role that he plays with LMOGA today. These associations, oftentimes people join associations and don't know the full impact of that membership and the association. But LMOGA and LEA, I see Don Briggs over there, LAPRO, LIAGO, and LOGA now, and I saw that he has received the Louis Golden Hard Hat Award, very much deserved. No one is more deserving than Don and the impact that he's had for this industry. And LAGCOE, it is a privilege to be here. Walking through the exhibits and seeing the interchange of ideas and young professionals and the exchange of technologies and approaches, that's what has brought, and LAGCOE should be very proud of the role that it has played in this U.S. gas revolution. And it's not only a U.S. gas revolution, it's an oil revolution, is that it has totally changed the dynamics of energy, not only in the U.S., but the entire world. And you all should be very proud of the significant role that you played in that. It was a perfection of fracking and horizontal drilling, and all of the technologies that went into it. And Chris shared a personal note as it related to the testimony of Alan Greenspan. In 2003 and 2004, I got involved with an LNG project and helped permit an LNG project. It just happened to be an import facility. And on another personal note, when I was living in DC, decided to move back because of fracking, that at that time it was believed that you could produce more volumes of gas, and it was selling at $5 and $6, projected to go to $12. Moved back to Louisiana, got involved in the oil and gas business. No one knew in 2006, 2007, 2008 how successful fracking was going to be. Well, as an investor in a project, I saw gas go from 5 to under 2. So I have a very personal understanding of the impact of fracking and what it did. It not only increased supplies, but it also, because of supply and demand, drove the price down. Therefore, we have excess gas that instead of importing, we are now exporting. That is why Louisiana, once again, with organizations and individuals like you, we will provide the leadership. Louisiana will produce more LNG than any other state in the Union. And the United States is a preferred supplier. It's rule of law, it removes the risk, it's stable political environment, and low-cost gas for 100 years. It is a perfect supplier of natural gas. Our project is G2 LNG. It is located, the site is located in Cameron Parish. We have about 1,250 acres. It's a 13.4 million ton per annum project. The investment amount is around $11 billion. Our partners are former governor of Louisiana, Buddy Roemer, his son Chaz Roemer, myself, and Eugene G., all Louisianians. I can't say that these are easy projects. These are very difficult projects. We feel very confident. We're excited about the progress we're making, and we're excited about being able to play a role in economic development for Louisiana.
Thanks, Tommy. From here to the end of the program, what we'd like to do, I've got a couple of starter questions that I'd like to present to the panel. But more importantly, and I think the real heart of the discussion really should come from the questions from the audience, and that's why we have a mic here. So as we go through the remainder of the program, if you have a question, please feel free to ask it here shortly. You know, my last count, and Tommy hit on it a little bit, my last count is there are 11 proposed LNG facilities in the state of Louisiana. That was my last count. I may have lost one or two. And the dollar amounts are numbing. They're with B's, not M's. And it's just numbing to believe that when we just casually say, oh, it's a $4 billion project or an $11 billion project, or you know, one company has spent $20 billion. I mean, it almost, we're numb to that, but these are really real dollars. And as I told the young professionals today, I'm not an economist, you know, I'm not trained in anything else, but what I do know is that if these gentlemen are committed to spending multi-billions of dollars on facilities, then they have the expertise to know that the economics of them are really good, and not just for a short term, for a longer term. So that being said, these 11 proposed Do you have any fear that there's oversaturation or the competitiveness will be difficult to operate, or some will, some won't? How do you guys see that with the 11 that are now on the talked about? Greg, you want?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chris. I guess a couple points. If you go back to your opening comments when we were talking about imports, there were probably 45 or 50 different import terminals talked about, and you probably had 6 or 8 built. So do I think there's some that are going to be talked about that never happened? Yeah, that's probably the case. But the demand curves are so robust, I think another 100 million tons a year by 2035, that the need is really going to be there. So it may not be all at the same time, but over time, I can see each one of the need for each one of those facilities to be there. And again, it goes back to the stability of the resource, the stability of the price environment, and the regulatory environment is so attractive to the outside world here.
Tommy, you have a comment?
Very good answer.
Well, and I do believe it's true, and I do believe that just the forecast of the amounts of natural gas that we have that are what's the term, discoverable natural gas volumes in this country certainly would support all of these facilities coming to fruition. So that's good news. Maybe a non-operational type of questions. As you proceed down to obviously getting your permits and all that, then you get into the actual turning of dirt and construction. Do you see the opportunities or the challenges with an employee base, whether they have to move in, where do they live, where do they stay, traffic flows and all of that, because it is such a somewhat confined area that all these facilities are? So maybe you can comment on what maybe your companies might or might not be doing to address some of the challenges of just the logistics of getting people in and out and staying.
Sure. Yeah. So it's obviously when you're dealing with a facility like this, you think about housing, you think about your impact on roads, you think about your impact on traffic. So we have discussions with the sheriff, with the police jury, with the port, with everyone to let them know what's going on. It varies a little for each facility. So in our case, we're very, very close to Lake Charles. I would call us a suburban facility. A lot of people could probably live at home and come to work in construction or as operations of the facility. That varies a little as you go down the channel and you get a little further away. They'll have to do some accommodations and things for their staffs there. But you do have to be aware of it. You don't want to be an adverse impact on the environment that you're in. Keep things positive there. In terms of the actual workforce, I think we're all trying to time it just right. So, when they're done with Cameron, we can roll them right on to Magnolia, and then roll them right on to the next one
roll
there.
them right on.
Yeah, we know there's a lot of good resources, a lot of good service companies in the area, so it's not a concern that we have.
Okay.
Well, I think in a rural environment, it becomes more problematic, and in Cameron, obviously, it will cause an influx of especially construction workers over the period of a 4-year construction time. And we're working very closely with the local community, because it's one thing to provide the housing for construction workers and employees, and it's another to do it in a manner that is beneficial ultimately to the community. And I believe that they're not mutually exclusive. I believe that you can do it in a way to benefit in the eyes of the local community, so that when the construction phase is over, there are 300 to 400 permanent jobs. There's permanent housing that was not there before. There's a fire station, police station on another side of the ship channel that was not there before. In other words, leave the construction phase so that the community's in a much better position than before you were there. That's kind of our approach that we're trying to strive for.
Greg, you had mentioned something about contracts, long-term versus short-term LNG contracts and the implications. I know you've had lots of experience in these contracts. Long-term versus short-term. How do you you business model that to what you're trying to do.
Sure. And that's been one of the major concerns, Chris, is so a facility like most that are being planned here need those 20-year type agreements for the financing. And the market has not been very active in signing those type of agreements. There's a few reasons for that. Very attractive spot market right now. So why do I sign a contract? I can go out and get cheap gas on the spot market. There's also 3 to 5 year type deals. So why do I need to sign a 20-year agreement? I can sign a 3 or 5 year type deal. I think what you have to remember is where this LNG is going around the world. They need that surety of supply because they don't have a North American grid to back them up. So they got to make sure it's in their tanks and that. So what we've kind of put together is just a model for folks to get comfortable with. If you think about an LNG buyer and what their portfolio might look like, and there's no magic to these numbers. This is just Greg sitting down and kind of splitting it up. But if you think 40% under long-term deals, 40% under 3 to 5 year type deals, and 20% on the spot market, that would be a typical portfolio of what an LNG buyer might have. So they're going to be involved in all spaces, but you certainly don't, most of you know, you don't want to be in a business where you're totally reliant on the spot market because that can kill you in a heartbeat. And so I think a portfolio approach like this makes a lot of sense. And if you think there's 40 to 50% of their demand that's still going to be under long-term contract, I think that's more than enough for what we need to build these facilities here.
Okay. Tom, you have any comments?
Greg, can you repeat that again?
I'll send you the slide.
I think
He said he'll send you the PowerPoint.
well, that's neat. Greg's absolutely right. And from an investor or project finance position, they're looking for a long-term certainty to pay off the construction loan, the project financing. And so what we're finding, as Greg has described, the short-term spot market pricing is making some of the potential long-term off-takers very hesitant to sign a 20-year off-take agreement. So I think part of what we're trying to do, and I know what Greg is trying to do, is trying to step into their shoes. They're looking for flexibility. They don't want to get caught where, as in 2014, they had signed long-term agreements at $14 and $15, and the spot market dropped because crude had dropped from $90 to $100, dropped to $26 in January of 2016. Consequently, the LNG spot market dropped to, back then it was give or take $5. Well, that's a great impediment to signing long-term agreements. So you've got to find a way to give security for 20 years, but flexibility to where they don't get burned by the contract they sign.
It brings me to a good point. Right before the program, I went back a little bit because I'm a big believer in history and ebbs and flows in whatever we do. It all kind of comes back, especially in the oil and gas industry. We grew up in this area that grew up here, lived the times of $100 oil and $20 oil. And it's sure to be that going into the future. If you could ever time it right, we probably wouldn't be here. We'd be at our mansion somewhere else, to be honest with you. But if you look at back in 1999, gas was roughly about $2.50 in 99. You look at, and then you fast forward it to 2008, June of 2008, $12.71. That's not what we want to see, right, Jason? We don't want to see $12 gas, right? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so it went $2.50 to just a short period of time. In years of our industry, that's just a blip on a radar screen to $12.71. Then you go to 2010, just 2 years later, and it's down at $4. Then you look at what it is today, it's at the $2.95-ish range. So that's the whole reason when we talk about the spot market, you don't want to be out there investing $10 billion in a facility being, held hostage to those kinds of spikes. So that's why these contracts, I think, are extremely important. Mr. LAGCOE here had a question. I wanted to recognize Don too. Don and I work very closely on issues of importance to the oil and gas industry. He has been a great honor or he has been bestowed upon a great honor this week. Someone said that he is the oil and gas ambassador to the world from Lafayette.
Question, if you just don't quiet for a minute.
Hold on.
And he's very direct.
And he's getting grumpy in his old damn age. Sorry, Don.
It's all right. Thank you.
I was trying to give you a compliment.
No,
Congratulations.
you're doing
I mean, I don't know what you're going to do with that hat. You've had it on for a week.
Now, my question is this. These are big projects, both of them are. And so you're coming into Louisiana and you're taking on these types of projects. And I just can't help but wonder, in doing so, what you would rate your number one problems that maybe you have encountered in doing a project like this in South Louisiana, if in fact have you had any?
Yeah, so I guess I can't really speak to any real problems that we've had, Don. I think it's a wonderful environment for us to come into. We're all relying on the ship channel, so I think whatever support we can continue to give the ship channel and keep that thing alive and vital will be extremely important to us. And supporting the port and the pilots and what they're doing, that's going to be extremely important because we're all hopeful to put a lot of traffic on that piece of waterway. But beyond that, no, it's a wonderful business environment for a facility of this type.
Okay, go ahead.
No, we've been very happy with the environment in Louisiana and state government and the local community and the various associations. I think they've been able to represent our needs and issues before the appropriate bodies and feel like they're being appropriately addressed.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got an open mic for some other questions. This gentleman right over here.
Does Louisiana have sufficient workforce in order to supply the needs that you need?
So if folks didn't hear the question, it was, does Louisiana have sufficient workforce to supply what we need? I think the answer to that, I'm hopeful, is yes. We feel very confident about that. Again, it's to the earlier point that the timing of the projects help. So you can kind of keep the workforce rolling from one project to the next. If they're all going to happen at the same time, that's going to be an issue that we'll have to think about. The thing I think you could do is that's going to be done by our EPC contract, right? So the KBRs of the world, the Bechtels of the world, need to make sure they're over here and they're getting their act together with the employment numbers here in Louisiana and comfortable with those resources, yes.
Good.
You agree? I have a quick, go ahead. If you speak up, we'll hold the.
So the question is, are other competitors like Cheniere, do they have 20-year contracts? Yeah, that was what it took to get things started. If you go way back, I was actually one of the guys who approved a 20-year import contract at Chevron. Yeah.
I feel you. I live that.
But yeah, that was all typical project finance. What you're going to see, which Cheniere will experience ahead of all of us, is once you're built and some of those things expire, you get out of them, then you're kind of free to market however you want. You can do 3- and 5-year deals and spot type of deals.
And again, it is important to know with all of these projects that we have here, Cheniere is the only facility right now that is actually producing product and shipping it out. Now, all these other projects will be coming online, at different times, but yeah, they're the only ones at this point in time. Yes, go ahead.
When you look at the developments in that area that y'all are setting up, Southeast Louisiana, you look at these maps of Louisiana and you see the dots of all the developments and they're overlapping each other and it's just so expansive. I guess the question I have as far as long-term, from a long-term perspective with all the LNG facilities, when you get to a point that you're at capacity. Is your thought to add trains to buy more property? We'll talk about merging with somebody else down the road. Kind of that thought process of as things start to merge together and you need more capacity or you don't have enough and you want to join up with somebody else, just kind of long-term thoughts.
Well, I like the way you're talking to that we're going to need to add trains to what we're looking at. I like that. You know, I think the marketplace, you know, is an amazing dynamic, and I think it will play out. And I agree with Greg, is that the global gas demand is grossly underestimated. I have talked to analysts, and the analysts will say one thing, and you'll say, well, that's really not the case. And they say, oh, really? Are you right about that? And I'll cite an article or an individual, and they don't always understand that. So I believe that the global demand is greater, but the global demand, wherever it is, would be accommodated by the existing projects that are proposed. In other words, I don't see, you know, I think there's a judicious proposal of projects at this point, at this time, and that can accommodate the global demand for 20 years.
I guess just a couple points to add. So obviously expansion is the cheapest way. If you've got an existing facility, just put another train on there. We'd all actually look at that first if that possibility exists. Yes. I think the other thing you have to expect is some competition from South Texas. There's some planned facilities over there. There's some opportunity there. So I think if there is that demand, it'll be there. And it'd be a nice problem to have. I agree with Tommy. It looks like we've got a pretty good grasp on the current forecast to meet that.
Well, go ahead.
Greg, you mentioned the Calcasieu Ship Channel. So do either of y'all see that as a potential bottleneck, given the narrow width of the channel, especially once some more of these facilities get built and start shipping product?
You know, we have a great relationship with both the pilots and the port, and I like the strategic way they're thinking about that so that we don't have to worry about that. And I feel very good about that, but I think that's why I say we need to support those entities as they have a vision for the future of that riverway to make sure it works. Really do.
And if I might add, too, that Mid-Continent, my association, has been very involved in putting the Port of Lake Charles together with the Water Institute of Louisiana, that they are funding to be able to solve the biggest problem that we have with the Calcasieu Ship Channel is where to put the spoils. That is a real problem. But we're taking it on, and I know that we've signed the contract. We will get the results of that study, hand it over to the Corps of Engineers, and then hopefully we'll be able to proceed to widen and continue the maintenance on that ship channel. Because yes, it's concerning with the amount of potential traffic flow on there. But we're taking it systematically, and this study is going to be the first thing, because frankly, we could have all the money in the world right now, and we do have some dredging money, but we can't dredge because we don't have a place to put the spoils. That has been a real bottleneck. That's kind of up to date of where we are in the Calcasieu Ship Channel. But we are working on it. Oh, go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, first of all, thank you all for coming and spending the time that you did in the Young Professionals Lounge earlier. We really appreciated that conversation. It was very insightful and engaging, and thank you all for that. Especially thank you to Chris for letting us know that we can all hedge our businesses off of $160 a barrel WTI as of December. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate it. Just kidding. But anyway, no, it was a great discussion, and I have more of a statement than a question. This is the third time this week that I've heard Alan Greenspan come up, and I couldn't help myself. I'd like to share with you all there. He wrote a book in 2007 called The Age of Turbulence, and I would encourage all of you to go back and read it. It's very retrospective, informative, and history is a great teacher. And he was a genius. He's a genius. And so grab the book, read it. You'll have a better perspective towards the future. So.
He's certainly a genius, but he was wrong in 2003. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Yep, back here.
So the question is, what would a Category 5 hurricane do to our facilities? I hope we never have to find out for sure. I can only speak to our facility specifically, and there's a couple of advantages there. So we're right on the turning basin. And so what they did there was they took all the dredgings and they dumped them on what is now Magnolia. So we now have the only hill in southwest Louisiana. It's about
25 feet
about
elevation.
30 feet up, well above storm surge, well above waves. So I think that, you know, for us, it's probably a little better because we are so far north. I think the other facilities will have to put some barriers and type of things in place. And then certainly we all need to get together to have a real plan for emergency response plan so that, that we can get things protected and then back up and running quickly.
Yeah, our plans incorporate a levee system as well as a foundation system that elevates it to a 500-year storm and is protected against any surge that we've known historically.
And if I might add to those comments, I mean, we just realized the Cat 5 hitting the Texas coast, which knocked out 12% of the refining capacity of this country for a extended period of time. But look where we are today in very short period of time. So I have faith in that these facilities not only are vigilant and doing what it takes to prepare for it, but you never prepare for a Cat 5 direct hit. I mean, you can do all you want. But the vigilance to be able to bounce back and be able to understand your role in securing America and Louisiana's future is very important. So now they're all pretty much from Harvey all back up. Now, still, you know, a lot of pain with the folks who got flooded, but as far as from a petrochemical standpoint in the refineries, we've done pretty well at getting back up. Yes.
Question: as more and more plants come online, it will be a very competitive business, I would think. So, what are some of those things that will give you that competitive advantage to be able to sign the contracts, get the clients signed up that you're trying?
Well, you know, the easy answer there is if you think about historically where LNG facilities were built, you have to spend billions of dollars on infrastructure, right? You've got to bring in your water, you've got to bring in your power, you've got to build roads. And so one of the great advantages that South Louisiana brings to us is most of that infrastructure is in place. Our chief operating officer's probably built 5 or 6 LNG facilities around the world when he was with KBR. And when he looks at the Magnolia site, he just cannot wait to get started. He cannot believe what he doesn't have to spend on infrastructure. And that's what really makes us very competitive in this market.
Wow.
Well, I think Craig's exactly right. I think that's an advantage that the U.S. and Louisiana has. The estimate for a CapEx for 1 million tons per annum is globally is about $1.3 billion. In the U.S., I would say it's going to be around of the second wave projects. It's going to be around $600 million. So you're talking about almost a half of the CapEx. And I think also advantageous to us, and this is a little bit of another answer, is that this is about moving gas molecules. It's not just about LNG. And so if you're out there saying, well, my gosh, you're talking about an $11 billion project and 13.4 million tons per annum, and obviously the large oil and gas producers are going to benefit in the big pipelines, but what is it? The ramifications are going to be so great, and the methods and the form in which these molecules get out, and that's why our project's a little bit different, and that's 2016 was tough, as Greg has already alluded to. And that, you know, at $4 or $5, a project like ours, frankly, has trouble in terms of viability. So as we believe that the market would come back, as it has, we had to figure out, okay, what do we do? We've got a great site. What can we do? Well, we realized, and this was talking globally with customers, is that it's not just mega projects for LNG. The large 4 million ton per annum projects are 10 million ton per. It is small scale LNG. It is small scale methanol. It is compressed natural gas. This is all brand new. 2 years ago, I sat down and talked with one of the leaders in the compressed natural gas business. And we were debating back whether to design and engineer a new vessel and I said, well, after a while I said, well, what are the other projects doing that export compressed natural gas? And he said, there isn't a project that exports. And it caused me to understand that we think Billy Tozan and Chris were introducing compressed natural gas cars back in '84, but Qatar was the only country basically that has been exporting, and that was for large projects. But you've got, since the Paris Accord of COP21, international financial investment bodies are not going to fund coal, and they're not going to fund nuclear. They're going to fund renewable and natural gas projects. And there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of gas to power projects on the drawing boards today. And the question is, how do you get the gas to them? Or can they better use methanol? It's all natural gas. So when we're talking about these large mega projects, what we're seeing, we are on the vanguard of something that's as exciting as what happened 25 miles from here over 100 years ago. We've never seen anything like this because we couldn't export gas and we couldn't export crude. Now we can. And what that means for this country and this state and the people in this room, whatever the profession is or career you have, we don't know where it's going to end up, but it is a very exciting time, and this organization's playing a pivotal role in realizing the dreams that are out there in front of us.
Yeah, how can you add anything to that? I mean, very nice.
Great wrap up.
It's almost a closing, but I do have one more question. I really can't leave without this final question because it maybe is a little bit out of our comfort zone, but is part and parcel of the whole globalness of the issue that we're talking about, and that's Russia. You know, Russia is dominant in the EU. They supply 40% of the natural gas to the entire European Union. A lot of people believe that that's unsustainable at the time. So how does Russia play in the whole global contract maybe, or supply chain, or breaking into the European Union? Because all of the contracts that I'm aware of now, or the negotiations, are mostly with Japan and China and those areas. But Russia's going to play a pretty big role in, and what is it, Gazprom? Gazprom is the name of the state-owned facility. Gazprom supplies 90% of the natural gas to Poland. So is that an opportunity, or is that not an opportunity?
No, it's a great question, Chris, and your example of Poland is actually a great one because they've been very forethoughtful on this. So it's one of the countries I'm sure a lot of us are having discussions with. They've come forward and said, we need some U.S. Gulf Coast as part of our portfolio. And you have to think all that Russian gas is right there. It's all pipeline connected. Be very hard for us to compete with that gas on price. So why are they interested in that? Well, they need the diversity of supply. They have been shut off at times by Gazprom. I don't like that. They've been probably overpriced, so to speak. So what U.S. Gulf Coast brings to them is something to keep the Gazprom pricing in line. and to also give them some comfort of that diversity of supply. What Poland has done that I think is really interesting is they've built a regas facility, and they're just going to play the market. So if they're getting what they're comfortable from Gazprom, they'll keep doing that, and they'll just trade LNG on the open market. And when they're not comfortable with what they're getting from Gazprom, they'll import LNG. So I think that's been very thoughtful. But the general comment behind that is they don't want to be 100% dependent on Russia. They need some of that diversity of portfolio.
Greg's absolutely right. I think there's, when you drill down a little bit deeper, Europe is not unlike Africa and the Caribbean and South America and Indonesia and many areas of the world that don't have a gas distribution system. They have an electrical grid, or they have a power infrastructure. So if you took gas to them today, they want gas. And Europe especially wants to get out from under the boot of Putin. And I talked to the former ambassador of Poland as well as Lithuania and the others. They said, look, we want the U.S. gas, but we got to figure out how to get it and how to use it. And I think that's when I say the challenges, and the challenges for individuals in this room, it's how do you deliver the molecules and in what form and usable fashion. And many times what they want is a complete package. Is if you deliver gas to them at their doorstep, they don't have a regasification facility. So you have to really get involved in the entire supply chain, and that makes it very exciting. And it's very exciting because all of you in this room understand that whole supply chain, and Louisiana is going to play a major role throughout the world.
Okay, one final tiny question.
I'll make it as brief as I can. Hopefully, I don't know if the answer will be brief, but the question will be brief. We've talked a little bit about the international side of this and the buyer side of this. Regarding the international promotion of U.S. LNG at a staff level, what advocacy role should be played by our federal government represented in our embassies and consulates around the world? And I ask this as a staff member of the U.S. Commercial Service, part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, in 80 plus markets with those assets at your disposal.
So I can give you a great example. It's really just the advocacy that's there. All right. So if you go back a couple months when President Xi of China and President Trump had their discussions, just the fact that President Trump said, no, we'd love for China to be one of our buyers of LNG out of the U.S. That did more for us in our discussions in China than you can ever imagine. And I have to tell people, look, there's no incentives or anything with that. He just said it's a good deal. China got very excited about that. It leads to a large number of bilateral discussions, which is what you want. That's why I say I think the administration is one of our best marketers by just saying the U.S. is happy to do business with you in that regard.
I'll just add, this is very new in terms of the marketing of LNG. And as you read in the paper today, even 6 months ago or at the beginning of the year, it was maybe every couple of weeks you'd read something about LNG. Now you read something almost daily. And the same thing's true that we're finding is that the embassies and the commercial departments of the embassies are becoming very well-versed on LNG, the natural gas out of the U.S., and I think playing a very valuable advocacy role for all of the reasons that Greg articulated earlier.
Okay, with that, I want to thank the two panelists, and I want to really turn it over to Tommy so he can repeat his close again. Can you do that one more time? Thank you guys for coming. Have a great rest of the LAGCOE show, and thanks for participating. Hopefully, it was of some value to you. Thank you.